Oh, check that out. Very cool. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you all for coming. We weren't sure how many people would actually come to this. This is something we've been talking about for a while, for a couple months. Some of the background of why we're holding this. Some people are concerned that this has nothing to do with Eric Mead's stuff. This was something actually we talked about.
Well before that.
It was probably like May or so when we first started talking about doing something like this, because we were starting getting a lot of questions about our board that we had in our space. I think probably every one of us got different questions about anywhere from what is this, what are you guys doing, to oh, this looks really cool. And I thought it might have been like some kind of design thing or something, I don't know. And this is actually our first kind of thing that we're doing. We formed kind of a small subgroup on our team, we called our IS Boosters, is to kind of share more information about not just like technology related issues, but what are some of the processes, what are some of the things that we're doing that deliver the things that you guys see and touch too. So it's a little bit broader than just going, oh, here's this piece of technology, here's some training, good luck. So a little bit more deeper than that. So with that, we also will be sending a survey out to everybody that actually came to get your feedback on this, okay, to see is this something you'd like to see continue for other subjects, or if it's something that, hey, maybe do this or that with it. Or if there's suggestions that things that you'd like to hear about or understand about, feel free to add those in as well. So, from an agenda standpoint, today we're going to give a quick intro, which I'm doing now.
That's a light switch back there. Has it kind of got dark in here? I'm gonna
It's fine.
just so you
I
guys
think
know
so.
what I'm walking back.
That's a light switch over there. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Jen. That's a light
Turn the
switch.
lights on.
Okay, now nobody can sleep.
Yeah. So the stuff we're going to cover, kind of give you an intro. We're going to talk about the challenges we were facing and why we did this. Okay. Talking a little bit about some things that kind of to make this happen, you kind of have to be able to do. And we're also going to talk about where does this come from? Where's this derived from? Where's KanBan actually, from a historical standpoint, derived from? Core principles of KanBan, and then also talk about what benefits that we've seen already with doing this. Okay. So just out of curiosity, a number of you had training I brought in probably 3 or 4 years ago for like Agile. Okay, who participated in that? That's right, because you guys weren't here. So this is derived a little bit from the subjects you saw back then. It's relatable. It's one of the different Agile methods you can use. So be interested. Have you guys ever heard of Lean processes, Toyota's principles and stuff like that? Brian's will talk more about the history of how this got derived, but a lot of this is based on that premise. It's on pool systems. Honestly, we'll share out a kind of a KanBan wiki page. You'll see there's tons of different, honestly, use cases for this in all types of environments. So this is not an IT or technology thing. I found case studies on hospitals using it. I've seen case studies, attorneys using it, marketing, pretty much every line of business has used this or applies in some way. Probably the biggest one we see, for example, with nurses is actually in their supply closets for all their supplies for the patients, where they go from basically kind of a account average inventory system to a pull system, meaning they're flagging stuff that they need, not what keeping a specific count of things. And Brian will talk about a little bit how you do that from a just-in-time standpoint. So, so going into kind of the challenge of what we had was, which I think is common to everybody, is we kind of have 3 types of what I'd call work that we do in our department. We have projects. For the most part, everybody has projects. We have kind of work request things. Now the difference how we discern those is a project we consider as anything that's above 20 hours worth of work and involves multiple people involved in it. Work requests are a good example would be someone, when you guys request a report for Agnes, say, Agnes, can you pull this report for me? To us, that's a work request, okay? And then we have other things that are more like ticket-based things, right? So, hey, I can't log in this morning, or this customer can't log into the website and get in as a ticket. So the challenge we had was managing all this work across the board. So when we did bring the Agile training, it was a lot more focused on projects. And one of the things with the scope of that is we're a small team. We don't have a dedicated product team that's just iterating and working on a singular product. We have people that, so I'll use Dan. Dan's here, he's one of our developers. know Dan. So Dan might be working on a project for our website, but at the same time he gets a ticket in about the user can't log into the website. If you're working on a project basis in a true software development environment, they pretty much have staked out that they're dedicated 100% to it, meaning 100% of their time can go into that. Let's say Dan made a commitment to Jen that, hey, I'm gonna get this done in the next week, but suddenly he gets a giant ticket that's gonna take him 4 days of the 5 for the week. His ability to deliver that to her for that project is basically out the window. And we saw this recurring repeatedly. Same thing with work requests. The other thing with it is how many people on our team, we didn't know how many work requests they really are getting on a daily basis. And it might seem simple, and Brian will probably talk a little bit more about this too. Our use case we came across was some of our people, say like Agnes and Lacey, especially our telecommuters. It was, okay, yeah, I work on, report requests. Well, how many is that a day? And we found a lot of people would bypass our ticketing system or just ask Agnes, for example. So when we're planning on a project, thinking, oh, Agnes will probably dedicate, a quarter of her week to do this project. The reality always become, well, how much time does she really have? Well, she's actually allocating 90% of her time actually to these work requests. Okay, how do we see that? Get a better bearing on it. The other issue we were having is because of that, we end up into like a competition for resources in your departments. I don't know, do you guys run into that where because you have people that are working on A, this person's working on project A, this person's working on project B, project C, but really the person on C also needs the person that's on A. C's charged with getting X done, A's charged with getting Y done, but C needs A, to actually finish out the project, right? So the challenge became, hey, I need you for this, I need you for that, I need you for this, and it comes back to, well, what do I work on? How do I prioritize my time with what we had? And with that too, also came a visibility issue. With this, who's working on what at all periods of time? How can I see that? And meaning all work, projects, tickets, and work requests. Okay, it's really easy kind of to figure out who's on a project. It gets a lot more vague, especially in the case of you have people doing work request stuff or stuff that's repetitive. So a lot of you are like people are handling mostly like task-based work. How do you know what they're working on? So it's kind of curious, how do you guys do that now? Do you know or do you not know? Any feedback? Weekly meetings? Bi-weekly meetings? Okay.
Action registers.
Okay. So that was kind of the issues we have. So this might help with some of that, and you can get some more visibility on it. So the other thing too that we had was like the workloads of staff. I mentioned about not being able to see necessarily what all Agnes is working on. It also gave us a way to see how much context switching people have between things. And Brian's actually going to put you through actually a good exercise. Many of you might have managers, supervisors that, or yourselves, tend to go, you can do this, you can do this, you do this, and you give someone 10 things. Do they really get those 10 things done quicker than if they had 2 at one time? So this goes into also the management of context switching between multiple tasks, multiple projects, and how to get it mostly done. So, any questions? What kind of challenges we were facing? I will say there's a couple of things I do want to mention as far as the prerequisites. A couple of things that we found in doing this, and I think number one is you have to have, I'll say, honesty from your staff in the work they're working on, right? So they have to be forthcoming with what is it all they're doing. When I mean that, it's everything, okay? They might go, well, I just do that, I run that, task on Mondays at 9 a.m. every day. Okay, you need that in here. Oh, well, so-and-so just sends me his email. It's not a big deal. I just do it. No, you got to capture it. You got to be able to capture everything. We ended up leveraging Zendesk to capture basically all work. So those that have done it is we ask all project requests go through there, and all tickets and work requests go through Zendesk. This is why. With that capturing of it, it automatically flows into our systems. And I know at any single point, everything we're doing for the most part, unless someone's outside the system, okay? That allows us to see the entire resource allocation of my entire department what they're working on and kind of what the status is in any given time. So I used to have the scenario of someone walking up to me and go, hey Ryan, I sent this ticket in and, you know, I'm having issue with this. What's going on with it? Okay. And I go, all right, who'd you send to? I sent an email to help desk. All right, run over to the help desk, talk to Willikers. Hey, do you know what this? Yeah, I forwarded that to so-and-so. They're working on it. All right, yeah, I talked to so-and-so. Yeah, I kind of started that. I needed Agnes's help with it, so I'm waiting for her response. Okay. Then by the time eventually I go to Brian or Rich, say, hey, what's going on with this? You guys know about this? This is kind of like a high priority thing. Oh, I had no idea about it, or I didn't know that was going on. We're not a huge team, but I'm sure we're one of the ones that run into that. And it's kind of like I call it the black hole. It just goes into the black hole and you wonder. I wanted a way that I could see all the work. And it's not from a micromanagement perspective. It's more of just a governance and control method that you have insight to everything that's going on if you choose to, you know. So for example, if Christine comes to me and say, hey Ryan, what is the status of X? I can go and find out within 30 seconds what the status of X is, okay, in the system. That's how we track and know where it's at using this. So the other kind of things that you have to be open to is not owning your work. And what I mean by that is, and Brian will talk about kind of KanBan process communications, is it's okay if you're struggling with something, okay? The idea with this is to pull out the struggles and identify them so you can help somebody with them. So like in our cases, we've had, Brian's will talk about in the past, we've had employees, especially technical people, tend to be a little more introverted. So they'll be working on a problem and they don't tell anybody. A week goes by, 2 weeks go by. Hey, what's going on with this? I haven't heard anything. I'm really stuck on it, but I'm going to figure it out the next day. Okay. Another week goes by. What's going on with this? And, and then you have a huge time delay when all that person had to do was say someone else's team, and they'd be like, oh yeah, no, I'll fix that, just do this. Okay. So you have to have a team that's okay with talking about what they're working on, and that's the pros and cons. It's both sides of it, where they're doing really well and where they're not doing well. Okay. The intention of this is to make you efficient in workflow. Okay. And Brian, like I said, we'll talk more about that. I think that's it. That's any other questions. Brian will take it from here. So.
Brian said I'm going to cover a lot of things. I hope I actually remember to do so. All right. So the first point I want to kind of touch on is a little bit about the history of what this all is. And as Ryan talked about lean principles and where it came from Toyota's, the challenge they were facing is they went kind of on a push-based forecasting system. We're going to produce 10,000 automobiles, and that's just what they're going to do. They go down the line. Maybe one stage there, they can pump out 500 bumpers in a day, but the next assembly phase can only do 300 in a day. Didn't matter the first phase, they're just going to keep pumping out their 500 a day, 500 a day, because that's what the task was. The end result is they have 10,000 cars at the end. Are they going to sell them all? They don't know. By the time they get assembled, did it meet the forecast? And these were the struggles they had, is now they had to store inventory. They had a lot of other issues, and they were trying to do a lot of work in an inefficient manner. So they actually went about looking at it a different way, and they actually got the idea from a supermarket. And that's kind of where these lean principles of a pull-based system comes. So if you think about it, as a customer, you go to the store and you pull the product off the shelves. And you keep doing that until the shelves get low. Only then does the grocery store react. They're not there constantly shelving, putting stuff out because they've run out of room. Once they get to a certain inventory, that's when they call the distributor to say, hey, we need more kicks. So they get another pallet of kicks in, they store what they have, and they put the rest on the shelf, and there they go. So they're only reaching upstream to buy the work when they actually need to. They do sit idle sometimes, but that's actually more efficient than finding a place to store a lot of the other items that they have. So it's really kind of looking at your workflow from a different angle, and that you're not just taking care of what you need to do now, it's looking at the larger picture of what is the end goal. As long as we can get products to our customer when they need it, it doesn't really matter how we get there. We just need to get there the most efficient way we can to best serve the customer. And that's why they went to this pull-based system, is all right, the forecast comes in that somebody needs 500 cars. Well, they went down the line and they would build the 500 cars they need to meet this, and they would put that out there for the day. As they've identified bottlenecks, which we'll start talking about as we get a little later on here, they reassign workloads and processes to better get those products out the door instead of just everybody doing their task and what they need to do. So that's kind of our next thing we're going to go down there after the history. It's actually the core principles. And there's 4 core principles to doing what we did. And the first one is visualizing your work. This is the best, cheapest, easiest way that you can put something together. And really, you just kind of gather your team together, and we started by, what are you guys working on? We all sat down, we spent about 5 minutes, sticky notes. Write everything down you got. Like, here's what I'm currently working on. Here's the tasks that we know that are sitting out there that we have to do for a project. Here's things I've already completed. And we just kind of just started to build off that. So now we have this list of tasks. Well, where did they come from? Who gave them to you? And what has to happen after you finish them? Sometimes they are just a one-off where you take it, you're done with it, and it's done. But a lot of times you're relying on your coworkers and your teams to move you along the process. So when I'm done with this, I need to take this over to Dan. When Dan's with it, maybe he has to get Jen's approval on something. And it just goes down the line. But how do you track that? And how do you know where it was? So we kind of just started to build that together, and we actually put together, we started with a 5-column board, but ended up going to 4 once we tried to change some of our processes. And this is really what we came up with, that we started with, all right, here's all the work that we have to do. Here's everything that's actually being worked on at this moment. Here's everything that's kind of in like a QA phase or has to be reviewed, whether it's internal to our team or even to external to some of your teams. And when it's done, we put it over here, that it goes out, we deliver it. It depends on the task, but it's just a general done column. Let's see. And we kind of, when you want to visualize this, you want to be able to quickly take a look at things to see what's going on. We can deliver status reports, and you can sit there and read and try to piece some things together, but we do this in a way that everybody can just kind of glance at it, and depending on what you're looking for, you can quickly figure out what you want to see. So how we actually broke up ours here, and I just want to say this is our example, and it's not a silver bullet. You guys might do something completely different, but this is what made sense for us of how we broke up our work. In this case here, we have pink representing project work, and we have blue representing the daily tasks that either we just have to do or the help desk tickets come in that Ryan mentioned, and we just kind of all lump them together, and here's the work to do. We put some other designations on things here, but how big of a task is this? How much time is it going to take? And it's usually futile to say it's going to take 2 hours or 4 hours, because rarely do you hit that. So we actually go with general buckets like t-shirt sizes, small, medium, and large. And we kind of went with the breakdown. A small, it'll probably take less than a day, 8 hours, maybe give or take a few on there. Medium, we went with less than 24 hours, less than 3 days worth of work. And in this case, large is less than a week's worth of work. And that way you can kind of see that if someone's sitting on one task, all right, it's a big one they're working on, or they fired off 5 small ones per day, okay, that's kind of what I expected to see go through.
I'd throw in one thing too, the relativity thing is important, because a lot of times, and I know many of you have been in projects I've been in, people get bogged down in worrying about really finite details, but at the end of the day, they really don't matter, right? So, like if someone said this needs to happen in 5.5 hours, or it's going to take 7.5. Does it really matter at the end of the day? And you get bogged down into that kind of minutia. Whereas this, it kind of abstracts and you're more dealing in relative terms. So like Brian's talking about how you customize to you. Your small might be 4 hours. Your small might be a week. Depending on the type of work that group that's managing this does. It's that variable. That's all about relativity. So.
A couple other things that you pointed out is we use green labels here to say who's currently working on it. So I can quickly come up with saying, all right, the green ones, here's the things I'm currently working on. Here's what Kyle might be working on, so on and so forth. So you can kind of see if it's green, where the status is on that. We even use purple to designate block that we can't go any further right now, usually because an external resource that we're depending on, that marketing example, we're waiting on a copy from something to put on the website. We can say, that's blocked right now, and as we review it, we can say that, okay, that's why we know what we're waiting for, and that one's just kind of on hold, but we know that it's still out there in progress. And that's the important thing that we do here, is we don't if it's on hold, we don't put it back over there because then it kind of gets forgotten about. Like here it says clear and present that this task still needs to be worked on and needs something to address. And do I need to escalate up the chain to have my manager go talk to a manager over in that department to, hey, this is actually a priority, or to see where it falls in the priority chain between both departments, and kind of take it from there to see, should this get done now, or okay, it's going to take a couple more days, but it's on the list to do for that side. Where are we at here next?
So one of the reasons why we put this on the wall, when we came out of our, it's pronounced KanBan, or you'll hear it as KanBan because it's easier to say KanBan. Like sometimes you'll hear it as KanBan because that's the official Japanese term. When we were given our training, we didn't have necessarily an application like a base camp or anything that we were ready to sort of use to get used to this process. So we started with a board like this up in our wall in the IS department, and every morning, and once we put down all of our tasks, every morning we would stand around as the day began and we'd talk about the tasks for the day. Okay, so we can give you an example of how one of these would work. Mikey, I'll give you an example. So we take a look at what's in progress, okay? And Mike right now is working on create design comps for the chemo renewal course, okay? Mike says, I'm done with that today. I'm actually done with that. Okay, so actually, wait, so you're gonna take your name off and put a done ticket on it, okay? Is what he would normally do, okay? And say, actually, you know what, I did do that, it's in progress, I'm done. Then we'd be standing around, and the next logical step is somebody has to review that. I would be the person who would be reviewing that particular task, so then I'd grab it and say, okay, that one's done. It might sit and done for a while until I'm ready to grab it, but I grab it, move it over in QA, and then I put my name on it. And we know it's in my courtroom now.
And that's kind of where it comes from, that pull, is that when Mike was done with it, he didn't just stick Jen's name on and say, all right, it's in review, and then sits out there. Maybe Jen was reviewing that, maybe she's on vacation, or maybe we have 2 or 3 other people that could do that task. So instead of assigning it to one, essentially comes up the first available person that can do that task, takes that one as their own, moves it into the next column to actually perform, in this case, the review. And so that's the key, is it's not assigning, saying, hey, Jen, you're going to be one to do this. It's more of Jen volunteering, oh, I have to do, there's a task over there that I can do, I'm going to take it. Or maybe if Melissa was free to do it, she could do something like that too.
Right.
And it's really about managing the work that way, not assigning it to people, but putting it out there and people being aware that these are out there. Okay, I have work to do because I see that it's sort of waiting for me to do now.
So as that sort of started, and we started to be able to grab tasks and move them around, we began to kind of be able to determine how many we could deal with in a particular column at a particular time, okay, as a group. And so, is that okay?
Yeah, that's what it's right. That's right. The next part, and that's what makes Kanban different than a typical to-do list. Is the work in progress. That's what WIP stands for, and it's really being able to limit what you could be doing at the same time. A case here that we had 5 over here as an example for work in progress. And which means
we think as a group we can handle 5 tickets in this column at any given time. And if there's not 5, then that's when we go over to the to-do column and move one more over. So that's how we kind of get, because at times it's kind of difficult, like we have to put a limit to something or else there's going to be a big bottleneck. We could keep grabbing a ton of these to-do items and stick them into in progress, but what it's going to do is then it's going to create a bottleneck. Say there's only 2 people that actually do the QA. It's going to create a bottleneck for these people because there's going to be so many things for them to grab. So this is one of those things where for per project, per job, per group, it's something that you kind of have to tailor and tweak depending on the work that you guys are actually doing, and how once you start using it, you start seeing how many tasks in sort of a specific frame of time you think you can have in any one column at a particular time. And then if it seems like, oh, you know what, we really could up this to 6 or 7 because these are getting done really quickly and we keep moving them over to here, then we would change our work in progress limit for this particular particular column. So it took us a while to figure that out, but we were able to get down some pretty standard numbers after a while of using it.
Did it affect, like, because you have project and
Task order.
tasks?
Mhm.
Did that matter where those were?
It really didn't as they were coming through here. It was, the key part here is like if you had a bunch of tasks that needed to be done and this was blocked, that's kind of where the repurposing of resources internally in your team comes into play. And so now we have 5 here and we've reached our limits. The team is basically told, you can't take anything new to work on until you move these out of here the whole way down the board. So if Dan was ready to say, all right, I'm free now, my task is done, what can I do next? He's not allowed to take something new to do. He's going to have to be one of the ones that takes this done item here, reviews these, and moves it down. And by moving the spot over to here then and taking it, somebody else or him, when he finishes that, is then free to take that down. And just kind of limiting the context switching and everything that they're doing so that they can be the most efficient. And kind of along those lines, I actually want to play a little game right now, so I do need a volunteer for somebody.
But you know what, Mary had a question.
She was not volunteering.
Oh.
She was so, I'm guessing in a lot of your jobs, probably all of us, where does a deadline come into place? Because I'm guessing, as I realize priority stuff is priorities, but like, is there somewhere where you're accounting for, maybe the chemo card that
Sure.
doesn't have a deadline?
But there's some things to do.
So where do you account for that?
Sure, so I can talk about that real quick. So we actually have if we can say like swim lanes, and you have the ropes going across, this is kind of our standard, here's everything. But every once in a while something pops up, like you said, like this needs to be done now, this doesn't work for Congress, we have to get this out the door right now. That's a priority. So we actually tag that and put it up at the very top of the board, so this next person who's looking for something to do jumps on that right away. And usually when things are up in priority, even if you're over your limit here, it's kind of like the grace that this has to be done. Everybody drop everything to make sure this is done now, get that through the board, and then continue as they are. If it has a specific deadline, we actually went through and we designate them with like, here's the date that things are. And the rule that we play by is if it's within 7 days, if the current day is within 7 days of the deadline in this, move it up to priority. Otherwise, we'll just kind of go through as it is. And that way we can kind of see where the priorities are of things, whether it's been designated or has a hard deadline. We've used different tags like that just so we can visually look at the board that we see a yellow tag, all right, we know we should keep an eye on this one because it's going to be coming due soon. And if anything's up there, that's kind of a drop all to get it done type of deal.
Yeah, and the drop all to get it done comment, that also applies to these columns. So if we have a work in progress limit of 2, and this is filled with 2, and this is filled with 5, like it's basically we can't move any more out of here until one of these is freed up and moved into done. So that means everybody who's working on this stuff, we all sort of pull together to get this one done. So as best as we can. I mean, so that's really the idea behind the work in progress limits. It's you stop everything you're doing when there's a bottleneck, when you've reached your limit in a column to be able to move it to the next one so that there's always a free space to keep moving through. Another thing is that one of the things about the deadlines is just for the sake of the fact that this is all visible now, when we stand together as a group, and what really helps us is that even I'm not on projects that Ed may be on, because we have the same job. We're both project managers, so we work on completely different projects. We rarely ever work together. But the fact that we're standing in a group and doing a daily stand-up every day and looking at this stuff, and I might keep saying, hey guys, I have that thing that's due on October 16th, like it creates awareness for our whole entire department of, just being aware that somebody has a deadline and how can we sort of make it work with with everything else that we have out there, so that no one's working necessarily in a vacuum or other people are competing for resources and not understanding where there's a problem or whose deadline's when. So that's another good thing about, sometimes it's a matter of just negotiation. So, because there can be conflicting deadlines when we both are still needing the same resources. So that does happen, but because we're all looking at it on a daily basis, every single morning, it actually has made it a lot easier to do those negotiations. So we're not waiting till the last minute and going, oh my gosh, like I needed so-and-so, and he's not available because he's working on something else, so.
So yeah, so just kind of on that, like we're talking about the work in progress. So it might sound weird, like you're limiting how much your work your team can actually do in one spot in a given area, but it comes back to the myth that multitasking is more efficient. And it isn't always necessarily that way. Most often it's not. And in the same amount of time, you don't usually get the same amount of work done, no matter what you're getting across. So to kind of play that game, can somebody want to come up and write for me for about a minute and a half? Anybody? All right. All right. All right. So we're reading this paper over here on the wall. And
I have really crappy handwriting, FYI.
So we're.
And did you want to grab Brian? Brian, you gonna grab those slides?
Oh, I'd rather grab what? I was busy on one after Roger.
Okay. I thought about that when I came in here, but I didn't have a chance to look. Okay.
So here's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna give you 30 seconds, and you're just gonna write out numbers in order: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and go and write as many numbers as you can on this paper in the 30 seconds. Ready, go.
Oh, God.
Stop. All right, so you got almost 39.
Yeah.
All right. So that's
pressure. No matter how long it was, right?
So that's doing one task for 30 seconds. And so at the same time, we're going to make it a little bit more complicated this time.
Oh, God. Do you have to sing or dance or something while I do?
So now you're going to alternate. So you're going to write letters, numbers, and then letters. So it'll be like 1A, 2B, 3C,
Okay.
and see how many. So ready, go.
I don't know my alphabet. Oh.
Stop.
Wow, that was way harder than you think.
Yeah, trying to get it done. And I mean, and there was mistakes that were made in there because you're bouncing back and forth between two things. Your brain is doing the context changing. So we're going to make it even a little more complicated on this last one, I promise.
No, I really do have.
So now we're actually going to test your math skill a little in this one.
Oh, I suck at that. Okay.
So in this one, we're going to count up by multiple of 7 and do the alphabet backwards. So now as you make the task get more complicated to see how well you change between them. Ready? Go.
Oh my God, I'm terrible at that.
Can we help her?
No. I have to get the number. What? Oh my God. I think that's wrong. Holy crap, I feel so stupid right now.
You are perfect,
That's the exact example, is that
we all did that.
well, while you have simple tasks, yeah, it might be easy to go bounce back and forth, but as the tasks become more difficult, you got way less accomplished in the same amount of time and make mistakes in the process. So that's really the key of trying to limit the work going on, is to find that number that ends up being most efficient for what you're trying to do. Thank you, Una.
Thank you, Una.
Way to go.
Now, we're not necessarily saying that multitasking is bad. I mean, there's a limit. Like, another thing that's been nice about this process is we've been able to see how certain resources, how many tasks they can take on at a particular time. Some people can only take, like on 2 or 3, depending on the type of work they do. Like a developer in our department, it's a lot harder to jump around from project to project than it is for a project manager to jump around from project to project. So there are, there are variations within each role, within each particular person. Some people are just, they're able to work a little bit more quickly on a bunch of things versus, you know, some other people. So like, but that also, seeing the visibility factor has been such a help with all of this, because it really opens up to, and people could see where other people need help too. If somebody's stuck on an issue for a long period of time, we just look at it sitting in there, and we'll go, I'll be the person to say, hey, John, that's been sitting, I'm not using him as a, you know, but just, hey, person, that's been sitting in progress for a really long time now. And then it'll start a conversation about, hey, do you need help with that particular task, or, you know, something like that. So
yeah, and
it helps.
And it's really then about those conversations. Like, that's actually the next topic on here, is just kind of focusing on the flow and how to improve the flow the best you can. And as Jen was saying, we do a daily stand-up every morning at 9:30 that lasts only about 10 minutes. But we review the board, we actually start on the right, what we finish, and we go across from right to left, and we talk about every sticky note that we have on the board, just to kind of keep things in mind, that if it has a particular due date, we're looking at it. Or as Jen's saying, if, hey, this one's stuck, maybe I need some help. Or it's even made things easier for someone to jump in. Hey, I can actually help you with that because I think this might be happening. Whereas if they were just working in a vacuum for a day or 2 or 3, or maybe only talking once a week, they might spin their wheels for 4 days, not get anywhere, or somebody else could jump in and 10 minutes later it's resolved because somebody else had an idea, or just brings in another visibility. When we do these meetings, we call them stand-ups because you stand up. It's important to do that because if you're sitting down, it becomes a meeting because you get comfortable, you're sitting there, and the discussion turns out a lot longer. When you're standing up around the table, we have our setup exactly like this here with the TV at the end and the table in front of it. We all just wrap around the table and we look at it and we talk about it. And it is only 10, 15 minutes. Some discussions will come out of that, but we try to pull those discussions afterward and make those, if it's going to be something big, you guys go just talk about it after we complete the stand-up and have the big discussion about it. But at least this way, everybody is kind of aware of what's going on. Like, my team, they work most of the day, and I'll be in meetings most of the day, but this keeps me aware of what's going on. So at least every 24 hours, I've kind of heard everything that happened the day before and what it looks like they're going to be doing the next day. So as Ryan said, if somebody asks a question, hey, where's the stand? I can pretty easily give an answer, even if I wasn't very involved in it. I'm aware of what it was, and that's the best way to keep me involved if I'm running around to meeting. And then at our level here, pretty much all of us do that. Like, really do. We're not always focused directly on our team, as we're doing a lot of other things to help the team. But this gives us visibility into what they're doing to best help them.
And, you know, a couple of things, like from my perspective, I've had on this. Number one, you might say, oh, I have to have a meeting every day. It's cut my meetings like to nothing with my staff. So I used to meet once a week with all my direct reports for about an hour. Teach in a lot of the information that is done here and a few other things at a project management level, then also at like a service level. We don't have, like, when we have our one-on-ones, we don't talk about this. I don't have to. The only thing we talk about is if there's something flagged, it's an issue, roadblock, or we might talk about something that needs prioritized. That's it. And those now have gone to, I meet my direct reports once every 2 weeks for maybe 15, 20 minutes. Because I don't need you to give me a rundown of what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I can go look myself, you know. There's no need for that. And even that split up to, for example, even up to Christine, I meet with her once every 2 weeks, maybe a half hour. We don't talk about projects unless there's an issue or a major, you know, event. If something's just running, there's nothing to give her an update on. She can see this, she can see our project reports. There's no need to have that discussion. So why have it? Spend your time on things that are more meaningful to put time into.
Yeah, I mean, same goes for me. Like, I have 8 direct reports, and they're every other week for half an hour, and most of the time it's not talking about this unless they have a question or, like Ryan said, a priority issue. So we just talk about a lot of other things that are going on to help them be more productive and more efficient. And you don't have to say, oh, every task, like, did you get this done? What do you need? Kind of thing. Like, that's already taken care of for the day.
My group also uses a board like this. It's not quite as sophisticated, but it doesn't need to be. So we just simply have a to-do, in progress, and done. And it's obvious, it's been great for me as a supervisor because before information was given either by email or verbally, everyone gets so many emails. And verbally, I don't remember you saying that things wouldn't get done, right? Wouldn't get done. Now, there's no excuses. Everything is listed on the board. And again, since we're talking every day, We've never had better communication in our department. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing at the same time, so.
And what, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No,
I didn't even
please.
finish, sorry. I was just gonna say, and it's nice for project managers too, because like I gave with the example of Ed's project earlier, a lot of times if you have a couple of project managers and they're working on completely different things, they never get to work together, you can also see where their projects are and what else is moving through the department so that you have a better understanding overall of resource availability and, you know, what we can actually commit to. So if I go into a meeting knowing that, you know, Ed or Melissa or Jason has like a really big project coming up, I'll already have that knowledge without, you know, without these meetings, I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't be aware of that stuff ahead of time so that I can make sure that we're not overpromising where we can't deliver. So that's and another thing I just wanted to make a quick point about is sometimes too in seeing the board, it helped us to sort of better organize our process. So one example was right now, the reason these are pink and blue, as Brian explained before, is these were project related and these are task related, things that would possibly come through as a Zendesk ticket. But then we might see task related ones that were like started to fall into a natural grouping. So this add course login link to ons.org and this add new strategic sponsor logo to ons.org, these are things that kind of deal with like putting something new on ons.org. So in that case, we would say, you know what, it's not a project, but why don't we just change the color of these so these ones match? Do you know what I mean? So then I can kind of look at the board and say, okay, those orange ones are all the ons.org tasks, okay? The blue ones might be the reporting tasks. So like we were able to, and we did this for a while, so we, you know, eventually we got to a point where even just a quick glance, like we could kind of see how many things were flowing through for what particular type of task. So we can even break it down further, which was a nice thing that we were able to kind of figure out and, you know, quickly see versus it just being a sea of pink or a sea of blue. Another thing is, normally in our to-do column, we have a lot of to-dos at the department, like a lot. We have a thing even before the to-dos called a bullpen, where usually what we'll do is like on a long extended project that lasts several months, we might create a task for every, like a project plan that contains a task for, you know, every single task we'll have to do from the beginning to the end of the project. We may not stick them all into the to-do column because it may just clog that up. So we might just put all the phase 1 tasks in to-do and just leave everything else like in a bullpen area or something like that. So so there are variations. Like as you know, Rich says, he said he just uses 3-column board. You know, you start simple and small, and then as you start tailoring it to your own needs and work and seeing how many things you're actually using, and oh boy, it might be better to color code these something different because they're kind of similar, then we would sort of make those adjustments along the way.
And another point I'd like to make with my board is that for those of you that have direct reports that do a lot of ticketing or their job is task-based every day, it really gives you a good sense of how much time they're spending on those particular duties and how much time they have to take project work on. So that was really beneficial to me because my guys, I mean, they take tickets and they respond to tickets. I had no idea how much time they were actually spending doing that until we started to use it. So it gave me a much better idea.
And so each ticket ends up for you guys, starts off in the to-do column.
Actually, we don't, since the majority of their job is tickets, we don't put tickets on our board at all. We put what we consider tasks, which are things that will be under 20 hours. Projects are 20 hours or more. But what I will do is I'll break those projects up into the tasks that they need to do for those projects. And by them picking them up, it tells me how much time they have available to actually do that kind of work.
In their case, I think most of them, they don't make it to the board because they usually resolve like inside desk before they get to here. What happens a lot more ticketing, say they have an escalated issue that comes up with Brian's group, that's when it will generally come over to the board. just because it's not something they're gonna fix in a day, generally
Right.
speaking, right? It's gonna be a multi-day effort.
Every piece of work my team does is one of these.
So for example, a lot of their stuff, I don't know how the first call, it's usually like 60 or 70%.
Yeah, they're required to have a certain first call resolution, and they beat that pretty handily, but they do a lot of tickets, one call, fix problems, so.
But some of the like major issues might float up to their board though. So their tasks and projects might derive from, oh, we got an issue with our wireless, we have to swap out.
Right.
Then it would have been hit the board.
Correct, yeah. But most of the things that we put on our board are specific things. Like, for example, we put individual phases of the move for what equipment needed to be put and where it needed to be put. When we have firmware updates, for example, like Brian said, the wireless or any of our other systems, things like that go on our board. So, but it gives me an idea of what we need to do, when it needs to be done, and who's going to do it.
And when I was talking about some of the other things we have in place, a big portion, especially with Will and Chris, the service management stuff that we do through Zendesk and service levels, that's where that kind of picks up the rest of that work from them. And
So speaking of the move, I'm assuming that you took a picture of your wall upstairs and then took it down and restuck it up. How are you working temporarily with the system?
So it's actually how we started, we can talk about that, is we did start with the physical board because that was the easiest thing to change as we had these discussions. And we had fairly frequent discussions like, what issues are we having with this board? And we kind of adjusted around until we kind of got into a stable place. Once we did that, particularly since Lacey and Agnes telecommute, we actually use a software program that's a mirror image of this board, and you can actually just drag and drop the items across there. So we don't use a physical board anymore, we use the digital one. But in all honesty, and talking to everyone on the team, we actually like this better. It's just getting that visibility to people who aren't at the office. What's the software? We use a software called Jira, but there's a number of different software ones out there. A popular one is called Trello. You can actually sign up as a free account, and you can make any types of columns and do whatever you want with it and make it meet your needs. But we can certainly talk and like put a list together of different ones you can take a look at to try to use.
And the thing about the board, and I think the trainers who stressed this, was we worked out our process first. Because it's important to figure out the process, then kind of what tool fits best with the process you want to write, right? So that's where we kind of ended up with it. And Jira actually nicely integrated with Zendesk, and Jira is more software development centric, essentially, flavor of it. But some of the ones Brian mentioned aren't really at all software development centric. So.
And you might find you just like this better anyway.
So we started this in October of last year, and we used it for 6 months like this before we actually switched to the software. For the telecommuters, we actually just like this, we stuck a webcam up on the board, and we would turn on the board every day. And so Lacey and Agnes would see like that picture right there, and we would just talk about it as we did it across the board. So it clued them in when we were able to do that, but once we just went to the software afterwards.
So how did I just pick up a task?
So we would do it for her.
Yeah.
We would write her name and then, so we would also sometimes, literally, we would grab like, this is Agnes.
Yeah, she had to put
We
a
would
mirror
bring it
up
up
in
to
her
the
house.
webcam and get close to the webcam and show her, like it was funny. It worked though, it did work.
Okay.
And we kind of had somebody like that she would ping like every week. Somebody she like beyond like Agnes or Lacey duty that this is the person you manage the task for them as they let you know kind of thing, and we just kind of managed it to help to pull all the telecommuters in like that.
I think it was good just from a communication. It got our team more talking to them more often too, because it was every day you were talking to the staff you never see, physically.
There's accountability too to that. So when you're looking at some, somebody's name is on something and it's been sitting in there for a while, or no, somebody's name is on nothing. Do you know what I mean? You're kind of like, what are you working on? There's accountability because you're accountable to your entire team at that point, because you can be, and we don't have that issue. I mean, luckily we have a great team that everybody works together. But if someone will obviously offer and say, hey, I'm kind of light right now, I can help you with that particular task, so we can get it done a little bit more quickly, possibly. So,
From a telecommuter standpoint, I'll admit I've had telecommuters in the past, and I wonder what the hell are they doing all day? Because from the standpoint of when they're in the office, there's really you should be working just like you're in the office, right? Whether you're at home.
Absolutely.
That when they go home, suddenly the response rate to email or phone calls or involvement with the team suddenly slide. And you're like, wow, they answered, I shot an email at 8 a.m. saying, hey, this is high priority, they got back to me at 4, and things like that, whereas you're on the call with them every single day in the morning, they're laying out what they're working on, so that whole issue kind of goes away. It's being a flexible work environment. Like, we're all for that. Our staff works all different hours, varied schedules and everything like that. But it gave me much more premise as to having confidence in what are they doing really when they're intelligent being, what is it that they're doing that we actually know. And I think Agnes and Lacey liked it more because they feel more engaged. So.
Like I was going to build off the Agnes thing. Like when I took over the team, Agnes was my only full-time telecommuter, and it wasn't like I didn't know her background, I didn't know what she was working on. So as we kind of got into this, it really gave me visibility into what she did all day. And we all know Agnes where she does a ton of work every day, but what specifically is it that she was doing? And we were able to better see that once she even started putting it down on paper. She even had to take a step back. She's like, whoa, I do all that in a day, kind of thing. Like she was kind of surprised and saw that. I think it was roughly 85-90% of her work was these task-based, was reports or this or that with IMUS, mostly around that. But that's all she did all day, and we were able to see that she puts on 15 reports a day and makes 2 batch corrections and fixes vouchers, and that's all visible now.
This might be a good segue since Una got us some drinks.
Well, actually, they are Ryan's.
Oh, they are Ryan's. To maybe bring everybody towards the table in the middle to show them how we translated this into a digital board. But before we do that, we do have some prizes because we said we would have some prizes.
So we do.
We do have some prizes. So, if you look under the right handle of your chair and you happen to have a sticker on there that has a W on it, or just a sticker at all, on the right handle of the chair that you're in, you might have won a prize. There may be 2 more.
Fight over chairs.
I want to slap yours back a little
Did
further,
you roll
Mary.
some out of the room? Is that what it is?
Check under.
He really could have this one.
Winner! Okay, so we got 2 green W's. They get a $25 Starbucks gift card.
Well done.
I happen to know the other green W doesn't exist on a chair that anybody's sitting in, so I'm voting we give it to Una for being our And the other one is a $50 gift card to Amazon.
Wow.
So thank you for coming because we really appreciate being able to share, how we work with other departments. Okay, so can we bring everybody up here and pull up the chair board? Another thing we wanted to show you is, so these tickets, the reason why they're so full and they're very, very specific, they're actual tickets. So we took these, we have an actual board, digital board that we can show you that is the same as this, but we'll show it to you, but it's the application that we use, it's called Jira. And Brian's gonna pull it up, but he's gonna pull up this same board in our digital format. Table is sort of to mimic the table that we have upstairs in our IS department, and it's the table that we use for our daily stand-up. And this is sort of the format in which we do it. We stand at 9:30 every morning. We stand around the table and eat candy and stuff if there is some there. But we stand around the table and we take a look at the board for 15 minutes maybe. So it's not even a long meeting necessarily. But we're going to show you how this sort of applies. It'll be the same type of board. This is our actual one.
So this is our actual board that we have that we'll go through in the morning. That's John with the mustache, Aaron with the beard.
Yeah, those are
Mike,
so we don't have little stickies with our names. We have pictures. Mike's a kiss face.
So you don't actually use this anymore?
No, we ended up transferring
we
it to
translated
a
it
digital
basically one for
application.
one right into the other system here. And it's as simple as like if you're working on something, as we mentioned, something's done, we can check mark and saying, hey, this one's done, that needs to be moved into QA for someone to pull that over. To do that, you actually just pick drag and drop, and you can move right over there.
Right.
Now, does it know who moved it?
It tracks who moves everything, but say now I moved it over because I'm going to work on it. I can actually assign it to
So if someone's scamming you, Ben, you'll know.
Yeah, it sends emails, you can figure it out. So I could assign this to myself. And now I'm on that task.
So which a lot of those would be, because like you said, you pulled them off.
Yeah, so anytime you move it, you're putting your name on it, is what you want to do. You don't want to move something for somebody else. It's your responsibility because you're taking on the work.
But also on the far right,
Unless it's for
Now she can do it on.
But she can do it on this,
you
yeah.
can also add notes on the far right
Yes.
to any of the tickets that are in there.
The big premise with everything that's agile you hear about is it's a bottom-up approach to management. So the idea is you're empowering your staff to take ownership. If they're coming out saying, I'm gonna do that, that's a lot stronger than you just going, here, you need to do this. And, it's one of those things, it's kind of a cultural shift people have, that they have to want that ownership and accountability. And like we found, a lot more people want that, because they're directing the work they're working on. What you're more doing as a, like say, project manager or supervisor is, you might give priorities to things, so they know what they need to take off the top.
Do you ever have projects that somebody just doesn't want to take and it just kind of languishes in the to-do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
A lot of times, the people can be voluntold sometimes.
Yeah.
It's usually
Times you have to-
Like that.
There's
yeah,
times
it's
you have
just
to
like, hey,
manage.
I need one. And I'll say, like, don't usually a person, like, there's maybe like 2 or 3 people that can pick up the task. I'm like, one of you 3 guys, whoever's free today, figure it out between yourselves. I need one of you to work on this. And I usually let them do it instead of specifically telling them. I still let them take ownership of it to go forward, even though it's not always the best work, or they don't want to do it. They know what they're getting into, but it's
I like that word
voluntold.
voluntold.
I just
Yeah.
looked it up.
You know what's another thing that's interesting, like Chris and Will, as we've been doing this and the things are in the to-do, it's sort of, I found out what their interests really are in the technology field, because they're taking things differently. Like Chris will take these and Will take these. So I'm able to even structure CE and things for them based on that. So it's been a pretty cool tool for me.
This is very cool.
It also creates a little bit of peer pressure. So if you have someone that you're sitting here in a meeting going, all right, I take one thing, and the person next to you is taking 2 consistently, it does bring to bear peer pressure a little bit, that you're not going to be someone that's not volunteering yourself eventually. You're just not going to, more than likely, which is better. Also another way you can get people involved in working more because they feel pressured to do it.
Right. So how we run this in the morning, do you want to talk about how we actually do it?
yeah.
every
So
day?
as we'll start here, we'll start on the right, and we'll say, like in this case here, the status bar on the foundation homepage. And Aaron, in this one, will give a status like, yep, he's updated the status bar. So whatever.
So we'll say, Aaron, any updates, or you put that in done, you done? And
He's
we'll be
like, I'm
"Yep."
done.
And we'll be like, okay.
Super.
Yay!
And then coming back over like into QA, then I just moved this over that I'll be working on. But then I'll say to Kyle, you're on this one. You're reviewing. You're looking into the import process that Vandalay does for CC registrations. Like, yeah, we're taking a look at this. We're comparing some numbers on some things right now to see where that stands for fixing the payment service that we're currently working on there.
Right.
And so that's how we can review that task. And he'll give his. Yeah, Vandalay is actually a program that will import and export things in IMAS.
But it was named for the sign.
It was,
Yes,
absolutely.
it was, absolutely.
So each morning what we do is we go in and we actually, we go through every single task in each column, and we ask the person who has grabbed it, what's your status on this? Are you still working on it? Does it need to be in this column anymore? Do you need any help with that? It actually goes pretty quickly. Some of them, because they're long tasks, they'll sit in a column for a while, and we'll just say, yeah, that's still where it was, so it doesn't take as long as it seems like it might. It really goes, we get it done in 10-15 minutes every morning.
And like this one here, like it's been, we mark this one as flagged. That's why it actually stays yellow. That's one of those block tasks that there's something else externally going on that John's not able to complete that task. But at least each day then we ask him, it's still going on. Are you waiting for something on somebody? What's the actual issue here? And we can keep a pace of it that way.
What's the tick?
So that actually can measure how many days something is sat in a certain column, or and it can actually do the lead time as things move across the board. So some of the newer tasks that came in here, Aaron moved, this one's been here for 4 days now. Some other ones have been there for quite some time, and when it hits the red, it's like, all right, this is a big issue. We can't resolve it right now, or it's a really low priority of something to do.
What are the icons?
So
the bug and the lightning bolt.
So as we use them for, like, if it's a new task, if it's usually project work, we'll just give it a checkbox. That's a task. But if it's a bug, we'll put the bug icon on it. So you give it a little, you can go in there and sometimes you'll take more of like on the bugs, like focus more on those because that's actually something that's already in production we want to fix now. We can use different icons like that to focus on and call out different items.
Right, and that's just a function of Jira. When you're creating a ticket, it'll give you an option to drop down. Is this a bug? Is it a new task? Is it an improvement? Process improvement? You can set those to whatever you want them to be. And those we actually figured out when we were working on this, but we were like, well, what kind of task is that? Should it, is it,
And for our team, we have a lot of different skill sets. Two people might be really good at something else, and others people might be something completely different. When we create these issues, we actually kind of made it so that you can denote what's the skill set involved in doing this. And what that really allows you to do, you can do one to many, is we can now quickly filter that, all right, I'm really good at doing Drupal stuff. So if I click Drupal, it'll filter the board to, here's the task that I'm going to focus on. And so it's that visualization. I can quickly see tasks that I can do and not have to worry about some of the things that I'm just not involved in right now or not my skill set whatsoever.
You can identify what these need to
be.
be.
And the software allows us to build all these queries on there saying where task is Drupal or where task is web postings, and that way people can kind of get to what they need to easier. So you don't have like the verbal vomit sometimes that you get on there with everything. You can kind of really focus down on what you're doing so you don't have to look through everything necessarily. And even from a project manager standpoint, it's like if it's a particular project, like when we were working on chemo, there's nothing left now, but you can see just the ones that were related to the chemo renewal course that was going out. So Jen could quickly get a status of where everything was when she was going into her weekly meetings with the education team.
The other thing, it kind of helps with the categorization. So Brian was saying with the different pools of talent, that affects our work, right? So in our case, for example, Drupal, really Dan and John are two Drupal developers. So say if we got a big surge in issues with our website, it's really only those two guys that are working on those. Okay, so it helped us also identify when we're looking at like the balance of our team of projects, what is the mix do we need? So every time we have a position come up, this gives you a little bit of a reference of what's the mix of flow are we getting. So,
can anybody on your team put something in the to-do list?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, and that's a good point. So can you hit the Zendesk filter? Since we have the ticketing system that comes from other departments, those are all called Zendesk tickets, okay? So we can filter it and just see those because we're under a service level agreement to get those at least addressed and, at least responded to. But there are certain tasks, like one day I'll say, hey, I really would like to be returned to the same page that I was on ONS.org after I log in up in the header. It sends me back to the home page every time, like I'll just notice something. So I'll just create a ticket in Jira, and that may be like a lower priority item. It's something that we all agree probably should be done. You know what I mean? It's like a nice to have. It's a lower priority item, and that will sit in there until like a time. Because there are times throughout the year when we're less busy for whatever reason, or a particular person is less busy, and then they can just pull from those maybe not higher priority items. So. We usually check around and ask, though. We don't just go adding at will. Like, I'm just going to start deciding all the things that I want done with the website, and I'm going to start adding tickets. I'll say, hey, guys, what do you think of this? I'm going to add it as a ticket. And they'll go, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. And
kind of building on that, being able to see some of this stuff right there is kind of giving us a better view of, hey, this might actually be an issue. This is something we as a group, we've seen maybe 10 times now, and someone might be able to call out the patterns. And so in the last 18 months of my staff, I've been able to repurpose 2 full-time employees from doing just task-based work of some things that were repetitive by being able to identify there's actually a larger issue than what they're correcting. And it was Steve Flew at the time, like his position went from all being task work like this to all being project work with his replacement, because we were able to correct those tasks instead of just the symptoms because we identified it this way. And a lot of things with Lacey too is another example. She did a lot of like duplicates and stuff that, hey, customer service actually does a lot of that too. So we're able to take some of our work and while customer service was already doing it, that freed up another employee of mine to jump on and do more project works and different types of work that we had, just because now we had a visualization of what's actually going through the pipeline day to day.
So if there, for example, I'm going to use that online AOCN test app issue. Mm-hmm. So it's a recurring issue, but only from one time a while ago. Mm-hmm. So with this, well, probably not because you haven't been using this all that long, but could you go back and look at It's the same issue, like how you resolved it then to just do the quick fix to
That's
resolve it.
typically what we'll do. I mean, like, this one's green, it came through Zendesk. You can certainly look back through, and that's what we often do a lot, that, particularly with Agnes, when she has to do like data corrections of some things, she has a script that she'll go back, she'll pull it out, and we can run it again a second time. And that's how we'll get through some of those a lot quicker. But it's, now that we know them, like, that can be tagged a certain way. You can put any tags on this you want. You can say,
This is how to fix this.
This is how to fix this. We can easily search that and pull these back up from the depths of something that was completed 6 months ago. Oh, that's how we fix this. Someone else can, you can actually run this now that you know that, and maybe hand it off to somebody who wasn't nearly as comfortable with it. But now here's the solution, and it was documented somewhere a while back. So that's been a benefit of having the software do it instead of sticky notes.
So then, everything that's sort of done that moves off picture frame is
Yes.
archived somewhere in there,
Yeah.
in the background, so that you can
Right.
search it and pick it up later.
Our area upstairs, when we had the door, there was a door to like a closet, and we just stuck it on the door, because we didn't want to get rid of the things that were
Because we still
done.
wanted to know, yeah.
So that would be a thing if you're gonna do a physical board, like where you collect all the finished tasks, but when you have a digital system like this, it's always kept, you never have to get rid of it.
Like that one right there is like general task force number 1414, so we have all 1,400 of those just back there we can search through. When you actually click on them, you can add in any notes or comments or attachments or anything that came off there.
That looks like, the ticket's there? That looks like it's the ticket.
Yeah, so we copy that in. It won't work on here, but we can actually jump back into Zendesk from a link on there if I was logged in. But I could click there, actually go see the actual Zendesk ticket that this was submitted by, if there was further details in that, or actually communicate back to you if I had further questions, we would do that through the Zendesk ticket. So we actually can integrate this into other things that we do. It's over the top for a lot of probably what most of your needs are, but it gives you flexibility that you can pretty much do whatever you need to do that works for your team and department.
So out of curiosity, you have that swim lane. Sometimes things will be further down the line that jump to the swim lane, right? Because now
Yeah,
they're
absolutely.
closed or whatever. So how does that work in relation to that?
So
I don't see a swim.
the swim lane disappears if there's nothing in it.
Right.
Oh, gotcha.
So if I would take I would take Mary's here, for example, and we can just say the priority on instead of standard is actually like expedited.
That's right.
Yeah.
If I refresh it, then it'll actually toss us a swim lane up on here at the top for a priority.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it doesn't waste the space. Like that was with the physical board, we had a couple lanes before, that's half your wall. So this, it collapses everything up.
This isn't Bandcamp. This is Jira. Oh, Con?
I think you can move it all the way over to the
I
desk.
thought Ed filled you.
I'm just gonna close it out.
How cool it was.
Where's the bullpen?
You know what, it also helped us
So
go
much
up
here, we don't
in
actually
all
do it on there. We
experiences.
actually created other ways to go back and look at it, call it bullpen
What about the
management.
in progress?
Or this is just all these tasks that, here's the bullpen and here's to do. So as soon as we move from there to there, it becomes visible on our daily board. We usually review this once every couple weeks if the workload's getting light, or these are like, yeah, we know these are issues, we don't have, it's not really a priority, but we want to keep track of it somewhere that, for website ones, like, all right, ProMed, here's a list of 10 things to go fix on the website. They're all going to come from our bullpen here that we just never had time to do, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I review this stuff probably once every couple of weeks. I'll take a look for, if someone comes to me and you guys, hey, this is something that has to get done. I go in there and look, and I'll usually flag it and say, hey, Brian, we need to escalate this. And literally it just bumps up and they see it on the board. The next thing they have, it's,
And I usually go and say, hey guys, something bumped up the priority, and someone will go take a look at it. Like we leave this TV on all the time in our workspace, just on the board. So as you walk into our space, it's constantly there. You see that when it's not YouTube.
What about work from your vendor? Is that possibly, any vendor support, is that
And
represented?
if there's something, interactions that we need to do with the vendor, sure, we'll put them out there. We're trying to even get more involved in like my management tasks that I do with the team, or if I'm working with other departments, or documentation of something. Trying to get everything in there just so that all my work is on there as well, that's outside of these tasks. So everybody can see what I'm doing, I can see what everybody else is doing, and
Yeah, it's a little harder, like, you're not gonna see me on there a lot, you're not gonna see Brian on there, a lot, or some of the other, like, Melissa won't be on there that much, and Jason, because we're kind of, these are the tasks that we're making sure are getting done, but a lot of our work is with setting up meetings with other departments and getting information from them, so they're not within our department. But I'm sure, like, if we really wanted to, we could get another situation going where we could add that. Right now, we just wanted, because there were 8 people under, that Ryan's like responsible for managing their tasks, and we all benefit from that management. That's why we wanted to focus on the developers and what they're doing.
Like our next iteration we're looking at next year that I'm looking for is taking Rich's board, Brian's board, and rolling them up into more of a global view of projects.
Yes, mega board.
Mega board. The king board, right at the top. And so I can, in that, my goal is actually to capture what Jen is talking about. So even where we're at with this, I would still consider beginner to intermediate level. A lot of the data analytics that you can get into this, we haven't got to that point yet. So we still consider what we're doing kind of beginner level. Honestly, get to maybe intermediate compared to like to an expert level. He'll end up talking about analytics and stuff like that with this too. So
yeah, you can put all the analytics together. You can see like over a period of time, if we had 15 tasks, how quickly we got through them, like well beyond anything that we currently do right now, and well beyond some of my understanding even of it. But the software gives you that analytical analysis of all that.
I just had a question. It seems like a lot of what you're describing, there are multiple individuals who could do the same task perhaps, where for our team, because we're small, we each
everybody just kind of does their
you know, and so short of perhaps doing the global thing, I guess, do you see a use? I'm trying to think of different things.
Well, you know what, my team's the same size as yours. There's 4 people.
But do your people do different things?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
But what
like
we can
Michelle
do
just does
is
one task
we can.
and Bonnie does one
That's
task.
fine. They can be put in there so each other knows what they're doing, so you know what they're doing, so you can see how far along in the process that particular task is. Yeah, there's a lot, and then also you're speaking every day for like 10 minutes during a stand-up, so you'll know that day if there's any roadblocks that they can't get that done, what they're doing about that, when they expect it to be done, all kinds of information.
So it's not necessarily a bidding, for lack of a better word.
No,
It's not a
no,
task.
again,
These are my tasks.
this isn't the silver bullet. You can adapt this
Right.
to your needs.
And it's probably really helpful if somebody is out unexpectedly.
Vacations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cross-training, right.
Well,
Yeah, it's incredible.
You know, even though it's maybe not a task that somebody's doing, if they see that all of a sudden that like Bonnie has all of these things that she can do, maybe there is something, it might not be Michelle's necessarily her forte, but maybe there's something she could do to help step in, and she wouldn't know it unless she's.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm thinking more for Congress, because that's where, this is all the stuff, and whoever has time, they
right,
just.
That's perfect.
Congress,
Yeah.
not the daily, I mean, that's how we manage Congress, not our daily tasks.
I see it as more, for my team is, a lot of the people do the same task, but they do them for very specific departments. So it's not like one person's gonna step in and do that, but I could see it more as a project status software that allows everybody to see what everybody else is doing, and if somebody has a comment or an idea on how to cross-promote something.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing, it fosters communication.
Yeah.
So.
Even in our case, our team's larger, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say we only have in each, like, say, role or person, it's probably 2 people.
Oh, really?
You know, I can't think we're gonna actually
No,
have any more.
I'm trying to broaden that so they can be more interchangeable, but it pretty much is only 2, like Dan and John on one side, and it used to be Kyle and Craig on the other, and it was, and so it was.
And like from a design research, you have Mike.
It was Mike, yeah. So
for the most part, Agnes is completely different than most of them.
So we just had a lot of people doing
Visibility
different.
and discussion every morning. You know, something comes up a lot of times where you figure out how you can share resources in one way or another.
But sometimes work that Mike does, that Dan has to do can't be done until Mike does something else. You know what I mean? So that's a completely different task, but they're related in that, well, Dan can't, build a button until Mike designs the design comp for it. You know what I mean? Like, it can't exist, doesn't exist yet for him to be built. So that way, even though they're completely separate, they do separate things, some of their tasks, like, it's nice to know when he's finished so he could start on his.
Right. So we
separate
can,
task.
that's,
Right,
right,
so you
checks
can
it
grab
off,
a separate
so that
task.
Dan can say, oh,
Let me
now
grab
I
that
can
other
pull
one.
it, now it'll
Right.
be, okay.
Right. Do you guys wanna, we haven't let you talk it all, but you use the system. Do you guys have any comments about it or things you'd like to share?
One thing that was really nice initially when we started, like Brian kind of touched on a little bit, was like we would get a lot of work from different channels. And one of the things that they hammered home to us in our training initially was you only, in theory, are supposed to take one thing at a time to work on because it helps avoid that context switching. And I found I got a lot more done when I was like, all right, this is my one thing, all right, this one thing is done, all right, this is my next one thing, all right, this next one thing is done. So where I might not have like more than one thing assigned to me at a time, I found like when I looked at it in a longer period of time, I was a lot more productive.
Does it foster a sense of accomplishment then?
If I don't get at least one thing done a day, I don't feel.
He's not coming in tomorrow.
Like, I think our high point, a couple months ago, when we were still doing a lot of duplicate stuff, we hit 36 in the done column for a single day. And like, that wasn't a sense of accomplishment, like, holy cow, we actually finished up that much work yesterday. And then now some typical day maybe is in the 5, 7, 10 range. But you can see everything that you've done, and like even when we did the physical board, you can see all the ones that you did, like I did this much, and you can kind of start to quantify the work that individual did.
The other thing is sometimes we'll cheer when a particular task gets done. Like the whole group of us will notice this one particular task that's giving somebody like just some problem. I may not be involved in it, but like we cheer each other on to a degree so that, you know, when it finally moves over into done and we know someone's really been struggling it for a couple of weeks, we're like,
Well, that's like a big point of this too, is they stress as part of the process. I don't think you got to this point yet, which is talking about kind of doing a retrospective on the work that you're doing. To kind of look at and go, okay, we've been doing this for a while. What can we do to change this or make this better? And it kind of forces you to look at it because as you find bottlenecks and other things that come up, but it also gives you a sense of taking a step back. I mean, I know my group are typically backlogged 3 months on work, about on average. But we just keep going and going, but never take a step back. Like, oh wow, we knocked out this year. Typically, you don't get a chance to do that. This kind of helps you do that a little bit because you see all the things that you've got done. So.
Forces a sense of accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like it or not.
If it's a good thing.
Yeah, kind of talking on the retrospective thing, it's something we're looking to try to get into more doing, and kind of the way that they recommend doing it is don't go typically longer than a month between them, because you forget what went on in the first week by the time you get to week 4. You see typically like once a week, once every other week typically, and get together and talk about what's kind of holding you back, what's going on there, and don't try to necessarily solve the problems, but just have a discussion around how can we make this better? Like what's kind of holding us back right now? Is it a bottleneck? Do we need to increase our work in progress limit because we're finding out that we're having a lot of downtime and we can actually bump that up to get a little more done? Have those conversations, and usually as you start to talk as a team, you might have an issue and I might have an issue, but we'll find out it's actually one issue in between if we actually look at it from the broader level based on the discussion, and we can make a couple tweaks to what we do, and 2 weeks later reevaluate. Did it make it better? Did it make it worse? Where do we go?
What have you found that when you find things that are blocked, you know, do you put why?
We can actually tag it in comments on this one.
Okay.
And usually it is based on an external resource, whether it's a vendor or another department, or it's just you have to wait for a certain date for something to come down before you can actually do something.
Right. So let's say it is a vendor, and it's obviously an external vendor. So does that put a red flag to maybe one of you?
Yeah.
You know, to say, hey, maybe I need to call X vendor to say, you know what? There's a couple things we're waiting for you on, and we need your assistance.
Absolutely.
And it elevates it beyond the developers, so that you have found that to be helpful.
Absolutely, and we do that quite frequently. And
we've done that. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no,
I was gonna say with like some, even internally, like say Kyle needs some type of report from Kristen and it's blocked because he's waiting for this report from, you know, an outside vendor or something. I'll say, do you want me to I'll contact her too if it'll help at all, you know, so she feels a little bit more pressure. When 2 people contact, we need this, you know, but that does, the flag on it does create those conversations.
Okay.
Yeah, and both, like I said, internal and external vendors, it's that reminder that, oh, I should send that email to them to follow up on this
Okay.
kind of thing. And
Okay.
they didn't do it 2 days, let me send them another email. And,
Right. Maybe not every day, but
no,
every other day.
depending on how close you're hitting to that deadline, the frequency increases. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Great, very good.
Please eat some more candy. Take care.
Yeah, like-